My name is Anne Hardy. I'm the coordinator of the GLAMx lab at the University of Newcastle Special Collections. And before I give my paper today, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm speaking from today. I'm in a Wabikal country and I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. The title of the paper I'm presenting today is Beyond the Digital Archive, Community Connection and Wellbeing. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Paige Wright, who also contributed to this paper. The paper explores ways in which digital collections at the University of Newcastle Special Collections were accessed and used during 2020, the year of the pandemic. The study uses qualitative and quantitative approaches. And firstly, we'll look at some statistics of the Living Histories digital repository to consider users' behaviour and connections to digital media, comparing March to November 2019 with the same period in 2020. This quantitative approach analyses in-tool statistics and Google Analytics. Secondly, using qualitative approaches, including storytelling as a key component to impact assessment in digital collections. Here we will show qualitative data by examining scenarios of case studies to illustrate user engagement and online contribution that may impact social wellbeing. But before we start, I want to just briefly show you just a bit of background as to digitisation at the University's Special Collections. Mid-1990s was when a lot of the 2D material started to be digitised. It's part of a heritage digital revolution that was underway across a lot of institutions. 2002, the University Archive began to work on bringing together all original Aboriginal resources under the virtual source book for Aboriginal studies in the Hunter region. 2003, the Coal River Working Party was established. It's now known as Hunter Living Histories. In 2010, digitisation is core business of special collections. A lot of use of quite common social platforms such as Flickr, SoundCloud and YouTube. And then in 2017, the Living Histories digital repository was launched.
This was a state-of-the-art digital online platform, bringing together over 2 decades of digital files. This site used the Recollect CMS and provided a large digital data store as a central station for all digital content. The introduction of this new platform also coincided with the establishment of the GLAMx lab and work integrated learning programs. With the investment of the Living Histories platform, the library needed a way to measure the success of user impact of this new repository. The team had already been collecting web analytics associated with the digital archive site for over a decade. And like many other libraries, the university has found increasing value in collection and analysis of web data. Since 2017, two sources of quantitative data have been consistently consulted. This is the Insight statistical tool and Google Analytics. Google Analytic figures of page views and sessions per month are also available, but they are substantially different to the Insight statistical tool. This emphasises the fact that web analytics are not completely accurate and often measured in different ways from system to system. Google Analytics is easy to implement and interpret. The acquisition tool can analyse referrals to the site, view traffic coming from social media sources, and use to judge efficacy of social media strategies in driving traffic to the site. Most of the studies on wellbeing and cultural heritage are literature that looks directly at engagement at heritage sites or wellbeing of volunteers associated with the GLAM sector. However, there's not so many studies from the perspective of a human-centered digital engagement perspective until fairly recently, and that's due to the pandemic. The sudden lockdowns have disrupted daily life in the way that we'd normally do things, depriving this physical access to heritage collections and sites, impacting a connection people have with one another, and also impacting their well-being. As you can see, there's quite a few studies looking at the increased feeling of anxiety, isolation, the lack of social connectedness through the pandemic, and also papers that relate to the glamour museum sector and how that there's a need to change with the increasing realization that there will not be a return to pre-pandemic world that we once lived. We suggest that this is likely to be the case in Australia as well, affecting most GLAM institutions, that the growing literature is very much about how we have moved online. During the pandemic, institutions have been building stronger identity online to engage with their communities. This is an interesting article by Jan Zastro, and it's particularly relevant to archives and special collections, as she writes quite frankly about this new normal in the post-COVID world and addresses some quite pertinent issues. She says it's an opportune time to reshape our collections to better reflect our communities, to fill the gaps of reconciling and undertaking archival repair, addressing past social justice inequalities. Although online collections are typically analysed using quantitative methods and collecting statistics, the lockdown period has provided the opportunity for us to look at user behaviour from a qualitative perspective, framed in this human-centred digital engagement perspective. As mentioned, the University Special Collections has amassed a vast digital online collection where communities can engage, edit, and make comments. Users can engage directly also with our Hunter Living History communities via our monthly meetings. So let's look at some of the data around users of digital content. And what we've done is compared 2020 with the previous year to get an indication of the change. This is our Living Histories platform, and the variety of data that we've gathered comes through Google Analytics. And this is our key tool for understanding the use of digital content during 2020. To get a wider perspective, we need to look at the data trends over the years. The digital platform has seen a steady increase in users and sessions from its introduction in 2017. The growth is contributed to by a variety of factors, including active social media promotion, engagement with teaching staff and students, the search of result rankings, and increased use from our communities. Comparing the user numbers between these two periods shows a dramatic increase during the peak of 2020 lockdown. March 2020 had an unusually low number of users. However, this was resulted from a site malfunction. The data from May 2020 showed a record high user numbers with a 51% increase compared to May 2019. We also use Google Analytics to analyse the traffic. The lockdown period in 2020 had a greater percentage of users. As you can see, 74% via versus 64%. Finding Living Histories platforms through search engines, and there was a smaller percentage of users, 12% versus 18%, entering the site through social media. This demonstrates it was not the library's social media strategy that drove an increase in traffic over that period. Out of the 12% of users that came to the site from social media in the 2020 lockdown period, 96% came from Facebook. Another interesting trend is the increase in UK visitors during this period. From March the 1st to November the 1st, 2019, we had 1,425 visitors from the UK. And from the same period in 2020, there were 2,254 visitors. This was an 85% increase. One hypothesis is that the increased traffic from the UK was from people in lockdown spending more time online. Despite this drastic increase, UK visitors only accounted for 3% of traffic during this time. Traffic from Australia accounted for 85% of total traffic in the 2020 lockdown period. And country location figures are not entirely accurate because of the use of VPNs, often masking user origins. One case study I'd like to talk about is the Piece by Piece project. This was undertaken by library staff during the first lockdown. They're looking at ways of promoting digital collections. It was a good cross-library team collaboration that led to the project, which was an online jigsaw that wasn't uncommon at other institutions, whereby historic photographs were converted to online puzzles using the free Jigsaw Explorer app. New puzzles were released weekly and promoted on the library's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. The project did not receive significant engagement on Twitter, but reached over 1,000 users on Facebook. It did succeed in drawing some users, around 200, from social media. As you can see, the puzzles homepage was the 18th most popular page on the site during March to November 2020, and qualitative feedback from 3 users indicated that they were having quite a few issues with the app and found it quite clunky and frustrating. Another project during lockdown was the Anglican Diocese Register transcriptions, which were the most popular page on the Living History site during 2020. In 2018, over 300 of the registers were digitised as a priority for their high use and fragile items. After uploading them to the platform, full transcriptions of these handwritten registers to make them full text searchable began. When the library went into lockdown, library staff worked on this project remotely, and in total there were 30 people who worked on the transcriptions. And the high page views of the registers during 2020 were a result of, firstly, individuals working on the transcription project, and secondly, individuals who found them either by searching social media posts or through other searches. Now, we'll just talk about the Hunter Living Histories website. This is the website here that's a WordPress site. It was established in 2009, and it's a university community collaboration that's managed through the library. The following stats come from the WordPress Insight statistical tool. And as you can see, there's been a gradual, steady growth of users over the decade. 2020, there's a marked increase from the previous year of users. The following examines further statistics associated with the site that shows the views. And as you can see, the darker blue is where there's more views, particularly during May, July, August, and November of 2020. When you look at November 2019, there was 7.1 thousand views, and then there's a jump of 10,000 views the same month in 2020. So quite a substantial increase through the search engine. In 2018, there were 19,000. 2019, 35,000. In 2020, 57,000. There was a 45% increase in 2020 during the pandemic. Not included in the above statistics is the influx of qualitative data we have received through emails and social media comments. An analysis of comments on the Hunter Living Histories blog from March to November 2020 revealed trends in how people reacted to our digital collections. Out of 72 comments, 25 contributed additional information. 21 offered praise for the work Special Collections was doing. 16 contributed personal stories related to themselves, their memories and their families. 6 were questions about projects. Central to this interaction is the idea of connection and contribution. This can be seen in 2 most popular collections in Living Histories. One has already been mentioned, and that's the Anglican Diocese Registers, but the other one is the Australian Railway Historical Society Unidentified Locomotives Collection. These 2 collections are visited because people are seeking to contribute by actively participating in transcribing and identifying content. Another project that arose during 2020 was the Anzac at Home project. This was first proposed by university academics, Associate Professor Heather Sharp and Yvonne Fletcher on the 24th of April. They reached out to special collections staff to undertake the project to document people's participation in Anzac Day during lockdown. There was a lot of momentum in the community, and it was thought that people would be more willing to participate if we were able to act quickly to arrange a call out for people to participate. This involved a simple website post about the initiative and an invitation to the community to share their images and stories. The project was promoted on the Lost Newcastle Facebook page and the library's Twitter. Over 100 photographs were shared, along with moving tributes recording people's experiences. Another example of positive connections were the Hunter Living History meetings. These meetings have been going since 2003. They're a community university collaboration from a variety of disciplines who come together to co-create projects. We were able to maintain the monthly Hunter Living History meetings during 2020, and comparing April to December 2019, where all meetings were only held physically, we had 255 attendees. And comparing this with the same time in 2020, where all the monthly meetings were via Zoom, we had an increase by 11 attendees. Overall, we had the 266 people attending during that period, which doesn't sound a lot, but the point I'd like to make is that, this was a long-standing practice of having monthly meetings, and it was able to be sustained without too much disruption. In fact, there were some benefits to having the virtual meetings as it enabled researchers, students, and others to join from interstate, who are able to participate and have the same benefits and act from a variety of disciplines who come together to co-create projects. I just wanted to share this by Claire Maguire, who talks about people feel most connected to history when they can find a connection or have made a valuable contribution. Maguire describes the important mission of cultural institutions to connect people with cultural resources, and that 2020 lockdowns have accelerated this need. She also asked the question, how do you start building a community around your archives, especially if you are new at this? Being able to build the community is something that Special Collections at Newcastle's been doing for a number of years through the availability of digital collections. 2020 has taught us how to sustain this community connection. And on reflection, I guess the year of the pandemic for us at Special Collections meant that we were in a favourable position because of the large quantity of online source and material that was available for some of our users. And in some ways, these online collections have contributed to a strengthening of a connection with our communities. So we didn't so much accelerate the need to digitise more material, but instead there were initiatives that were formed and created and shaped through the needs of our communities and how they used our material. What we've learned is the need to refocus on collating statistics, particularly around our online users, to better understand trends during such global events as pandemics. From mainly the UK, there is a lot of studies that have come out from this human-centred digital engagement perspective. And I think by writing up case studies is a good way of documenting perhaps what you've done in your institutions from this very qualitative and human-centred digital perspective that is quite different to the way we collate statistics when people walk through the door and they're engaging directly with physical collections.
Finally, this paper highlights that the practices adopted during the pandemic, such as managing online resources and audience engagement, demonstrates that perhaps there's special collections and archives, particularly those with online collections, that have continued to be relevant, perhaps even more so being able to maintain that effective transfer of knowledge and continue to heavily engage with their communities. So although this paper is only really touched on quantitative analysis of platforms and statistics and insights, we definitely acknowledge that there's further work to be done on digital archive use and user behaviour, using more sophisticated conceptualisation and ongoing measurement. And we're hoping that this paper is just giving us some ideas of how you can reflect on what's happened in your own institutions, and hope that you've got a few ideas that you can just share with your colleagues. So thanks very much for listening.